Fort Resolute sat under a cold, desert night, miles of sand shimmering like broken glass under the floodlights. It was nearly 2300 hours, that dead zone between late-night operations and early morning readiness. The motor pool rumbled softly with idle diesel engines, security checkpoints buzzed with radios, and in the barracks, boots thumped along the tile floor in scattered rhythms. Nothing about the night looked unusual, until it did. The story of how 3 generals arrived unannounced and shut down an entire U.S. Army base overnight didn't start with a massive breach, a scandal, or a classified leak. It started with a soldier walking into a dim hallway, and another soldier hitting her in the face. Specialist Maya Rios, 23, carried quiet strength like a second skin, not loud, not flashy, not someone who ever asked to be noticed, but she noticed everything. Her discipline was the kind that didn't need to be shouted. Precision in how she folded her uniforms, sharp timing in her movements, eyes that didn't wander, even under pressure. Her peers respected her. Some admired her. One hated her. Private First Class Blake Hart. They were the same rank, same squad, same training cycle, but different in every way that mattered. Hart was the kind who mistook volume for leadership, who mistook fear for respect, who mistook Maya's quiet professionalism for weakness. Tonight, that mistake would shatter everything. The fluorescent lights hummed as Maya stepped out of the latrine, wiping sweat from her forehead after a late-night workout. The barracks hallway was empty except for the heavy sound of boots approaching. Hart rounded the corner. He smelled like cheap whiskey hidden in a hydro flask, like anger that had been simmering all night. His jaw was tight, eyes red, steps uneven but determined. "Maya," he said, voice thick. She paused. He rarely used her first name. "What do you need, Hart?" "You think you're better than us?" he slurred. Maya frowned. "What are you talking about? You reported me, a step closer. You told Staff Sergeant I skipped training." She didn't flinch. "You did skip training. I didn't report you." He asked the squad what happened. "You could have covered for me. That's not how this works." His fist clenched, and Maya felt the hallway shrink around them. "You're making me look bad," Hart growled. "Trying to make the rest of us look weak. Think your perfect record makes you special?" Maya exhaled slowly. "Hart, you need to go sleep this off. Sleep." And that was the moment something snapped in him. "You don't tell me what to do." His hand shot forward. Not a grab, not a shove. A clean, open-handed strike across her face. The sound cracked down the hallway like a rifle shot. Maya's head jerked sideways, cheeks stinging with a sharp electric heat. She didn't stumble, but the shock registered through her whole body. Hart froze. Even he seemed surprised by what he'd just done. Maya lifted her hand to her face, fingers brushing the spreading warmth under her skin. "Hart," she whispered. But he was backing away. "You pushed me," he muttered. "You provoked me. You did this." He turned and ran toward the stairwell, and Maya stood there, breath trembling, heartbeat pounding in her temples. She didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't chase him. Instead, she opened her locker, pulled out her phone, and did the one thing the Army had pounded into her since day one: report immediately, accurately, without hesitation. She sent a message to her platoon sergeant. Then she waited, alone in the hallway, hand still pressed to her cheek, breath steadying into something sharp, controlled, unbreakable. Staff Sergeant Daniel Brooks lived by protocol. He didn't bend rules, didn't ignore red flags, didn't let "it's late" be an excuse. So when a message flashed across his phone, SSG, need to report an assault. Location, Bravo Barracks, I'm okay. Rios. He didn't hesitate. Brooks threw on his uniform, called the CQ desk, radioed the duty officer, and was out the door. In under 6 minutes, he was in the hallway with her. Maya stood straight at parade rest, despite the swelling already blooming near her cheekbone. Brooks' jaw tightened. "Did Hart do this?" "Yes, Sergeant." "He drunk?" "Yes." "Did anyone else see it?" "No." "Maya," he said gently, "do you want medical?" "No, Sergeant. I just want the report done." That answer, calm, steady, unwavering, chilled him more than if she'd been hysterical. "Okay," Brooks said. "We're doing everything by the book." He made 3 phone calls, one to military police, one to the company commander, one to the battalion duty officer. He didn't know that something much bigger was already moving behind the scenes. Because when the battalion duty officer called the battalion commander called someone else. And within 40 minutes of the slap, the incident reached a general's desk. Not because of favoritism, not because Maya had connections, not because Hart had a record, but because the Army, unlike the rumors, took peer-on-peer assault extremely seriously, especially when alcohol and chain-of-command negligence were involved. It was 01:03 hours when the first black SUV rolled through the front gate. The guards stiffened as a star plate glinted under the floodlights. A one-star general. 2 minutes later, another SUV, a 2-star. 7 minutes after that, a third SUV, a 3-star general. What nobody on base knew was that Fort Resolute had been under an IG, Inspector General, spotlight for months due to escalating leadership failures, disappearing reports, and mishandled disciplinary cases. Maya's assault wasn't the first incident, it was the final straw. By 01:30, the entire chain of command was assembled in the battalion conference room, half of them in physical training shorts, half in unbuttoned uniforms thrown on in panic, all of them visibly terrified. None had time to prepare excuses. General Alden Pierce, the 3-star, stood at the head of the table. His presence carried the weight of a man who'd seen multiple wars and lost good soldiers to negligence far more often than enemy fire. He spoke with no anger, just cold, surgical clarity. "I'm not here for the assault alone. I'm here because the assault was predictable, preventable, and symptomatic of a culture failure on this installation." Silence. A colonel swallowed hard. "We will begin interviews immediately," Pierce continued. "The base is shut down until further notice. Training, ops, all movements. Frozen." A lieutenant colonel whispered under his breath. "Holy—" "I heard that," the general said without looking at him. Maya was escorted to the battalion headquarters. She walked calmly despite the growing bruise, despite the cluster of officers whispering as she passed. She had no idea that 3 generals were waiting. Staff Sergeant Brooks walked her into a small conference room, then stepped back. General Pierce stood. Maya froze, instinctively snapping to attention. "At ease, Specialist Rios," the general said softly. "You're safe here." Her hands lowered. Her breath steadied. Pierce looked at her for a long moment, not at the bruise, but at her posture, the steadiness in her eyes. He'd seen fear, seen trauma, seen chaos, but what he saw in her was something else. Composure under unjust pressure, strength without retaliation, courage in the smallest form, telling the truth. "Maya," he said gently, "walk me through exactly what happened." And she did. No embellishing, no bitterness, just facts delivered with the clarity of someone who had nothing to hide and nothing to fear except letting the truth go unspoken. When she finished, the room was silent. Finally, the general spoke. "Specialist Rios, you did everything right. You upheld Army values when others around you did not." A second general added, "Your integrity tonight may very well save this base." And the truth was, it already had. He wasn't in trouble. He was in catastrophic trouble. Military police found him hiding behind the motor pool, hands shaking, face pale. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't tough. He wasn't shouting. He was sobbing. "She made me do it," he kept saying. "She kept reporting me. She pushed me. Save it," the MP said. He was cuffed, searched, under armed guard. He would face assault charges, drunken misconduct, dereliction of duty, violation of UCMJ, Article 128, possible removal from service, and something else. Every level of leadership above him would be investigated too, because soldiers don't break in a vacuum. It happens when leadership lets discipline erode grain by grain until a base becomes a powder keg waiting for a spark. Tonight, Hart was the spark. By dawn, the entire installation was locked down. Battalions were ordered into formation on the freezing asphalt. Not to train, but to confront the culture that had grown under their noses. 3 generals moved from company to company, brigade to brigade. They didn't yell. Their silence was heavier than any shouting could have been. They asked questions. Who feels unsafe here? Who has been ignored when reporting misconduct? Who has seen alcohol abuse go unaddressed? Who feels their leadership has become complacent? Hands rose, hesitant at first. Then dozens, then hundreds. A base is a living organism. And this one had been quietly infected for far longer than anyone admitted. Tonight was the diagnosis. Maya wasn't present for the Command Purge. But within 12 hours, one battalion commander was relieved. 2 company commanders were suspended. 4 NCOs were under investigation, and the entire installation was placed on a 72-hour culture reset lockdown. Training halted. Classes replaced PT mandatory briefings filled the hours. Every squad leader and platoon sergeant sat through 3 rounds of IG interviews. This wasn't punishment, it was cleansing. An overdue one. She sat alone near the PT field at sunset, watching the sky fade from orange to violet. Her cheek was swollen, but the medics said she'd heal cleanly. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't feel brave. She felt tired, exhausted in that deep, moral way, the kind that comes from standing alone in a hallway while someone twice her size towered over her. Brooks approached quietly. "You holding up?" he asked. Maya nodded. "I didn't expect all of this." "I know," he said. "But sometimes the smallest moment exposes the deepest crack." She took a slow breath. "I didn't want him to lose his career," she said softly. Brooks shook his head. "Maya, he lost his career the moment he decided to hit you. You didn't take anything from him. He threw it away." She swallowed. "Did I do the right thing, Sergeant?" Brooks didn't answer with words. He sat next to her, looked at the sunset, and after a long moment said, "You did what every soldier should do, but most are too afraid to." The next morning, Maya was summoned again. General Pierce was alone this time, standing in the conference room with a folder in hand. "Maya," he said, "I want you to understand something." She listened. "This base didn't shut down because you were hit," he said. "It shut down because you told the truth." He stepped closer. "People think courage only happens in firefights. It doesn't. Real courage is quiet, invisible. It's a specialist standing in a hallway at midnight, choosing integrity over silence." He extended the folder. Inside was a commendation draft. "It's not official yet," he said, "but I'm recommending you for the Army Commendation Medal." Maya blinked. "Sir, I don't think I deserve—" "Specialist Rios," he said firmly. "You deserve much more than this." Her throat tightened. "For what it's worth," the general added gently, "I'm proud of you." Hart stood in handcuffs near the MP building as a vehicle arrived to transport him off base. He looked hollow, drained. No fight left. As Maya walked past on her way to the admin office, he met her eyes. For the first time, he didn't glare. He looked ashamed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She paused, not because she felt pity, not because she forgave him, but because she needed to say one thing. "Hart," she said quietly, "I hope you get the help you need, but what you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice." And she walked away. After 72 hours, Fort Resolute reopened. But it wasn't the same base. New rules were posted, new leaders installed, alcohol restrictions tightened, duty safeguards strengthened, reporting systems overhauled, and soldiers said something they hadn't said in a long time. Leadership is watching again. Maya returned to training, chin high, steps steady. She didn't act like a hero, didn't want attention. But soldiers from other companies nodded to her in the chow hall. NCOs watched their tone around her. Officers carried themselves sharper, more alert. Her presence had become a quiet reminder. One act of truth can reset an entire base. Epilogue. The general's final words weeks. Later, before leaving the installation, General Pierce called the soldiers to a final formation. He looked at them, thousands standing in the crisp desert air, and he said, "Courage isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It isn't a fist or a shout or a punch thrown in anger. Courage, real courage, is a young soldier standing alone in a hallway choosing what's right over what's easy." His voice deepened. "And because of that courage, this base will never be the same." Then his gaze shifted, just briefly, to Maya. A silent acknowledgement. A salute not of rank, but of respect. True courage isn't in battle, but in standing for what's right, even when you stand alone.